The smell of burning never really leaves your nose. Even now, sometimes when I open the oven, I'm right back there, standing beside the gravel driveway in my slippers, watching 50 years of my life go up in orange and black. Smoke, sirens, shouting, boots thudding through the dirt, a firefighter yelling, "Ma'am, you gotta move back," while sparks floated up into the cold Iowa night like sick little fireflies. My father built that house with his own hands after he came back from Korea. My husband rewired it, replumbed it, and added the extra bedroom when I was pregnant. I patched the roof, painted the porch, and scrubbed those floors more times than I can count. My son? My son stood there in his nice city coat, hands in his pockets, and said, "Well, at least that old shack's gone. Maybe now you can get into a shelter closer to town so I don't have to drive so far." That was the night I realized I was homeless. And according to my only child, I was a useless, homeless old woman. My name is Margaret, but everyone who actually likes me calls me Margot. I'm 60, widowed, and until that fire, I lived on a little farm about 40 minutes outside Des Moines, Iowa. Not one of those big commercial operations, just 20 acres, some chickens, a garden, a few acres leased to a neighbor for hay. Enough to keep me busy, not enough to make anyone rich. The farmhouse was old and stubborn, like me. My dad, Joe, built it in the late 50s on a piece of land my grandmother left him. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, sagging porch, the whole Norman Rockwell starter kit. We added on over the years. An extra room for my son, central air when my husband's back gave out, a small metal barn when we finally decided the old wooden one would blow down in the next good storm. I loved that place. Not because it was fancy, it wasn't, but because it held my life. You could stand in the kitchen and point to memories. That corner, where my husband kissed me goodbye the morning he drove off and never came back, thanks to a drunk driver on Highway 6. That squeaky board, where my toddler son lined up his toy tractors. That exact stretch of counter where I taught myself to bake bread because buying it every week was getting expensive when prices started creeping up. My son, Noah, grew up there. Bare feet in the yard, mud on his knees, first bike ride down the gravel lane. He used to chase the chickens and pretend they were dinosaurs. He'd climb the walnut tree and shout that he could see the whole world from up there. Back then, he used to say, "I'll never leave this place, Mom. I'm gonna build you a big house on the hill and you'll never have to worry about money again." Kids say things. The trouble with getting older is you remember all of it. Noah was a smart kid, too smart for a little school out by the cornfields, according to his teachers. He got a scholarship to a college in Des Moines, then an internship at some marketing company downtown. City life suited him. New jeans, new haircut, started saying rural like it was a diagnosis. "Mom, you should sell," he'd say, poking at the old floral wallpaper when he came by every other month. "This place is a money pit. You're not getting any older." "I'll sell when I'm good and ready," I'd tell him, patting his hand like he was the child again. "And when I do, it'll be because I want to, not because you think I look shabby in your Instagram feed." He'd roll his eyes and say, "It's not like that." But it was. Visits got shorter, calls got less frequent, everything was busy and the market, and we're in the middle of a big campaign. He'd talk about client dinners and rooftop bars and the new place he was renting closer to downtown. When his father died, Noah came home for the funeral, stayed for one night, and complained the whole time about how bad the Wi-Fi was. I blamed his grief. I blamed the city. I blamed anything but the obvious. That my son was turning into one of those people who only see value in things with a price tag. Because if I admitted that, I'd have to admit he didn't see much value in me. So I held onto the house, held onto the land, held onto the life I knew how to live. Until the night it all burned. It was early March, the kind of cold that gets into your joints and sets up camp. I'd made myself a cup of tea and was sitting at the kitchen table with my electric bill spread out like a bad omen. Prices had gone up. Again. In the margin, I'd written numbers circling the parts that scared me. Minimum due, late fee, disconnection notice.
I was halfway through calculating how many eggs I'd need to sell at the farmer's market to make up the difference when I smelled it. Not the faint burn of a forgotten pot on the stove. This was sharp, heavy, wrong. I checked the stove first, off, then the outlets. Fine. The smell got thicker, harsher, like breathing smoke flavored with chemicals. I opened the back door, and that's when I saw it. Orange flicker against the night, lapping up the side of the barn. For a second, my brain refused to connect the dots. Flames were something you saw on TV, not at the base of your own hay bales. Then the adrenaline hit. I grabbed my phone, my purse, don't ask me why, 60 years of being poor teaches you what you can't replace, and ran outside in slippers and an old cardigan. 911, what's your emergency? My barn's on fire, I said, staring at the way the flames had already crawled up to the roof. And it's close to my house. Please hurry. The rest came in patches. Sirens in the distance, neighbors rolling down the lane in their pickups, headlights slicing through the smoke, somebody yelling that they'd try the hose, even though we both knew it's useless at that point. I remember the heat the most. It wasn't just hot. It was like opening an oven and stepping inside. My eyes watered, my skin prickled, my chest tightened. "Ma'am, you gotta stand back," a firefighter said, guiding me toward the driveway. "You got anyone else in the house?" "No," I said, breath bursting in little clouds in the cold. "It's just me." "You got somewhere to go tonight?" "Sure," I lied, because pride is stupid, but strong. "My son's coming." I had texted Noah from the driveway. "Barn's on fire. House might go too. I need you." No answer. I called. Straight to voicemail. It wasn't until the flames hopped from the barn to the old wooden back porch, dry as kindling, that my phone finally rang. "Mom, I'm in the middle of something. What?" "House is catching," I croaked. "Noah, it's all going. I don't think they can save it." He was quiet for a beat, like he was waiting for the punchline. Then, "You mean the barn and the house? Both?" "Yes." He sighed. "Jesus. Okay, I'll come out, but this is exactly what I was talking about. That place is a death trap." I gripped the phone so hard, my knuckles hurt. "I didn't start the fire, Noah." "He's not saying you did," he said in that exasperated tone that means he absolutely thinks you did. "Look, I'll be there when I can. Don't freak out." "Sure, I'll get right on that." By the time his car pulled up, the house was mostly gone. The roof had caved in, windows burst. The front porch, the one my dad built, was nothing but glowing bones. The firefighters had done what they could, bless them. They stopped it from taking the trees on the neighbor's fence, but my house? My house was done. I stood there in the yellow light of the trucks, hugging my cardigan to myself, shivering in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. Noah stepped out of his car in expensive boots and a jacket that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. He walked up, looked at the smoldering wreckage, and said, "Well, guess you're finally getting that fresh start everyone talks about." I stared at him. My home just burned down. "Yeah," he said. "Mom, no offense, but it was a matter of time. That wiring was ancient. How many times have we talked about this?" I felt something inside me crack. "I talked about fixing it," I said quietly. "You talked about me selling up and moving into some senior complex. Well, it would have been safer." He rubbed his hands together against the cold. "So, where are you staying tonight?" The question hit me like a slap. I I don't know yet, I admitted. The Red Cross lady said they might put me up in a motel for a bit, said my insurance will want to talk to me. I grabbed my purse and came out. You didn't grab your important documents? He asked, incredulous. Mom, come on. My file box was in the hall closet, right under where the ceiling fell in. He rolled his eyes. Unbelievable. The Red Cross volunteer, a sweet woman with tired eyes named Linda, came over then with a clipboard. Ma'am, we've got a room for you at the Budget Inn in town for a couple of nights, okay? After that, we'll work with you and your insurance, see what options are available. I nodded numb. Is this your son? She asked, looking from me to Noah.
Yeah, he said before I could. Good, she said gently. You've got some support then. Noah shifted his weight like the word support made him itchy. We rode to the motel in his car in silence, the smell of smoke clinging to my clothes, sinking into his nice leather seats. He cracked the window and didn't say anything, but I saw it. At the motel, he helped me carry my purse and the plastic grocery bag someone had filled with donated toiletries. We stood in the doorway of the room, a bed, a small TV bolted to the dresser, a bathroom with a rust ring in the tub. Well, he said, clapping his hands together like we'd just finished a home improvement project, at least you're closer to town now. I stared at him. I mean, he went on, oblivious. This is what I've been saying for years. You can't take care of that place by yourself. You're, older. It's too much. Maybe this is the universe saying it's time to simplify. There's a shelter downtown that has a good reputation, I heard. They help seniors get placed in a shelter? I repeated, tasting the word like ash. You think I should go to a shelter? What else are you going to do? He asked, genuinely puzzled. Move in with me? I don't have space. And Emma isn't... She's not really into chaos. His girlfriend, of course. I paid your rent for a year when you were out of work. I watched your kids. I don't have kids, Mom. Right. That was my grief mixing decades together. I watched you, I corrected, and your friends and half the neighborhood kids whenever their parents needed help. I worked double shifts at the diner so you could go on that band trip. Yeah, and I appreciate it, he said, glancing at his phone as it buzzed. But that doesn't mean I can conjure up a spare room. I barely cover my rent as it is. Look, let's be rational. There are services for people in your situation. They literally exist for this. People in your situation. When your own child talks about you like a case file at a nonprofit, something in you withers. Anyway, he added, stepping back toward the door, I have to go. I've already missed one meeting and I've got a presentation tomorrow. Text me when you hear from the insurance, okay? That's it? My house burns down and you... Mom, don't do this, he said sharply. I came, I showed up, you're safe for the night. Don't guilt trip me because you chose to stay in a falling apart farmhouse instead of letting me help you downsize years ago. Help? I repeated. He looked at his watch. I'll check in with you this weekend. And then he left. The door closed, the lock clicked. I stood in that beige motel room holding a plastic bag of travel-size shampoo and realized I had absolutely nowhere to go once the Red Cross voucher ran out. You know that feeling when you've been strong for so long that if someone looks at you too kindly, you'll crumble? That was me. 3 days later, sitting on a park bench with a thrift store jacket over the same clothes I'd been wearing the night of the fire. The motel stay ran out, the insurance company hadn't called back yet. I'd gone to the county office, signed forms, stood in lines. Every receptionist had the same look, tired sympathy, the kind that comes from seeing too many stories just like yours. Ma'am, the shelters can help you get back on your feet. You're on the list. There's a bed tonight, but after that we can't guarantee... I ended up at a city park near a row of trendy little businesses, coffee shop, yoga studio, some place that sold candles for more than my weekly grocery budget used to be. I sat on a bench, hands cupped around a paper cup of cheap coffee, feeding bits of stale roll to the pigeons because it gave my hands something to do besides shake. I was thinking about my father's calloused hands carefully laying the first boards of that farmhouse, about my husband covered in drywall dust, swearing under his breath as he tried to fix a crooked door frame, about all the scraped knees and school projects and Thanksgiving dinners that house had seen. I thought about Noah as a boy, falling asleep on the couch with a comic book on his chest, and the way he just called me people in your situation. Guilt gnawed at me. Had I raised him wrong? Had I spoiled him? Had I leaned on him too much after his father died? Or not enough? I was so wrapped up in my own spiral that I didn't notice the shadow fall over me until a voice snapped, "You can't sit here." I looked up. A young woman in a neat black apron stood in front of me, arms crossed.
Behind her, through a big window, I could see small tables, glass pastry cases, employees in matching shirts. A cafe. New. "Excuse me?" I said. "You can't sit here," she repeated. "You're making my customers uncomfortable." I blinked. "I'm feeding the birds." "You're homeless," she said, like it was a fact on a spreadsheet. "We've had complaints." Something inside me shrank. I'm waiting for the shelter to open," I said. "I just lost my home in a fire. I don't care," she interrupted. "You can't loiter right outside my cafe. It's bad for business. There's a shelter 3 blocks over. Go, wander over there." Wander? I stood up slowly, joints protesting. "I'm not a stray dog," I said, surprising myself. She rolled her eyes. "Didn't say you were, but this isn't a park bench for that." She gestured vaguely at my thrift store jacket, my scuffed shoes, my entire existence. The pigeons scattered as I turned and walked away. I made it around the corner before the humiliation hit so hard I had to lean against a brick wall and breathe. By the time I got to the shelter, the brave face I'd been holding together all week finally cracked. The shelter was in an old church basement that smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Rows of metal-framed beds lined up like a dormitory designed by someone who'd never set foot in one. They handed me a thin blanket, a pillow, and a sheet of rules. No drugs, no alcohol, no violence, lights out at 10, no saving beds, meals at designated times. My bunk was near the back, between a woman who smelled like vodka and despair and a man who snored like he was auditioning for a chainsaw advertisement. I sat on the edge of that narrow mattress, clutching the blanket, and the weight of it finally crushed me. I've been through things. I buried my husband. I survived an emergency hysterectomy with barely any insurance. I worked minimum wage jobs for decades, stood on my feet until my knees screamed, and still went home to cook and clean and pay bills. I always figured I was tough. But sitting in that shelter, listening to someone yelling at a staff member down the hall and someone else coughing so hard they sounded like they might split in half, I broke. I put my face in my hands and sobbed. Messy, ugly, chest-heaving sobs that made my stomach hurt. "Shut up!" someone snapped from a few bunks over. "Some of us are trying to sleep." "Jesus, lady, it's not that bad. At least you got a bed." An older man across from me tossed his arm over his eyes and growled, "This is why I drink. Everyone here is either crying or yelling." I tried to swallow it back, tried to be quiet, but the dam had broken. 50 years of holding it together poured out. Apparently this was the end for me. Widowed, homeless, disrespected by my own kid and told to wander away from a bench because my existence was bad for business. I don't know how long I cried. Eventually the sobs turned into hiccups,
then into that hollow, dry sort of feeling you get after a storm. I lay down, clutching my purse like a life vest, and stared at the ceiling until the lights went off. I thought, dimly, well, Margot, this is it. This is where you die. In a bunk bed that smells like old socks, surrounded by people who don't know your name. I've rarely been so wrong in my life. The next morning, everything hurt. My back ached from the thin mattress. My eyes felt like I'd rubbed them with sandpaper. My throat was raw. They woke us up at 6 with the kind of cheerfulness only volunteers armed with clipboards can muster. Breakfast in 15. Line starts at the kitchen. I shuffled into line with everyone else, clutching the plastic tray they'd handed me. My hair was a mess. I hadn't seen my own face in a mirror in days, which was probably for the best. I stared at the floor. Gray tile, chipped, shoes shuffling, the murmur of low voices, the smell of powdered eggs in weak coffee. I slid my tray along the metal rail until it reached the gap in the plexiglass where a gloved hand would plop food on it. "Next!" someone called. I pushed the tray forward without looking up. "Aunt Margot!" The world stopped. Nobody had called me that in years. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating. Maybe my brain had finally cracked and I was hearing echoes of the past. I looked up. Standing on the other side of the serving line was a woman in her 30s. Dark hair, pulled back in a sleek ponytail, nice makeup, the kind you only bother with if you're used to meetings and cameras. Her volunteer apron couldn't hide the fact that her clothes were quality, well-made. She looked like she belonged on one of those local leaders posters. But it was her eyes that did it. Big, brown, curious eyes I'd watched watch cartoons and thunderstorms from my old couch. "Lily?" I croaked. She grinned, and for a second, the years fell away. I saw the 7-year-old girl who used to run up my front steps shouting, "Aunt Margot, Daddy said I can stay till dinner." "Oh my God," she said, dropping the serving spoon into the pan with a clatter. "It is you." The people in line behind me grumbled, but I barely heard them. "I thought—" Lily leaned closer, voice softening. "I heard there'd been a fire out by your place. They said the house was a total loss, but nobody knew what happened to you." "I'm here," I said lamely, gesturing at the line, the hairnet, the whole sorry picture. "Clearly." "What are you doing here?" she asked, then immediately winced. "I mean, I know what you're doing here, but you know what I mean." I swallowed hard. "I lost everything, Lily. They put me up in a motel for a couple nights, but I don't have anyone." "What about Noah?" she asked, frowning. "Wasn't he working in the city?" "He is," I said. "He's busy." Something in my voice must have given me away, because her jaw tightened. She glanced over her shoulder at the other volunteers. "Hey, can someone cover the station for a minute? I need to step out." A young guy in a college hoodie slid in to take her place, and Lily walked around the end of the line, grabbed my tray herself, and said, "Come with me." We sat at a table in the corner, my tray cooling between us. She hadn't changed so much, really. Taller, more polished, sure. But the way she leaned in when she listened, the concerned crease between her eyebrows when she heard something upsetting, that was all the little girl I'd known. She used to come over when her dad, a single father, and my neighbor had to work late. I'd feed her mac and cheese, help with homework, and read her stories while she curled up against my side. "You're my second favorite grown-up," she'd announce every time. "Who's the first?" I'd ask. "Daddy, but only because he can drive." Now she was staring at me like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. "Start from the fire," she said gently. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about waking up to the smell of smoke, about the barn, the house, the flames crawling up the siding like it was nothing, about the motel and the Red Cross and the forms and the people in your situation. I didn't mean to mention what Noah said, but once I started, it all came out.
The old shack, the shelter closer to town, the way he'd left me at the motel like he was dropping off a package. Lily listened without interrupting, her eyes darker and darker. When I got to the part about the cafe girl telling me to get lost, her nostrils flared. "So now I'm here," I finished, picking at the dry toast on my plate. "Lucky to have a bed, according to the gentleman across from me last night." For a second, she said nothing. Then, "I'm going to kill Noah." I barked out a laugh I didn't know I had in me. "Get in line," I said. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You took care of me when my dad was working himself half to death. You fed me when he forgot to shop. You came to my school plays when he got stuck on the late shift. You taught me how to make scrambled eggs that aren't rubber. There is absolutely no universe where you should be in a shelter while your son exists." "Well, he says space is tight, and his girlfriend doesn't want chaos." She made a face. "His girlfriend can get over herself." I sighed. "It's fine, Lily. I'll figure something out. The insurance will come through eventually, and then—" "Insurance," she repeated. "What's your policy like?" "Like Greek," I said. "They sent me this big packet with coverage D and replacement cost and exclusions." Noah looked at it once and said something about dropping certain parts to save money. I let him talk to the agent last year. I hate this stuff. Numbers make my head spin. Her eyes narrowed. "He changed your policy?" "He said it was outdated," I mumbled, suddenly embarrassed. "He was very busy, so I just signed where he told me." She stared at me for a long moment. Then, "Okay," she said quietly. "First things first, you're not staying here if I have anything to say about it. Second, I'm calling a lawyer. Third," she took a breath, "I need to tell you what I do now." "I assumed you were, volunteering?" I said, gesturing at her apron. She smiled faintly. "I am, but that's not my day job." She hesitated, then said, "I own a real estate company." "Oh," I said, picturing a little storefront office with a printing machine and a wall of faded house photos.
That's nice, honey. She laughed, a short, breathy sound. "No, Aunt Margot," she said. "I own Turner and Hart Real Estate Group." The name tickled something in the back of my mind. "I've seen that on billboards," I said slowly, "and on those signs in front of those big new developments by the interstate. Those are mine," she said. "Well, mine and my partners. We do commercial and residential, but most of our money comes from land acquisitions and development projects." I blinked. "You're successful," I said, feeling stupid. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table. Her name, Lillian Hart, was printed in clean black letters, followed by CEO and managing partner. The address was in one of those slick new office parks. I stared at it. "Sweetheart," I said, Are you rich?" She snorted. "Comfortable." "How comfortable?" "Comfortable enough that I can get you the hell out of here and into a place with actual walls," she said firmly. "But what I really want to talk about is your land." "What about it?" I asked. "It's ash now." "Your house is ash," she corrected. "Your land is still there." "How many acres?" 20, I said. "But it's nothing special. A bit of pasture, a bit of woods, a creek that floods when it rains too hard." Her eyes lit up like I'd just told her I had gold buried under the chicken coop. "Do you have any idea what that land is worth now?" she asked. "Not much," I said. "It's out in the middle of nowhere." "That middle of nowhere is 3 minutes off the new bypass they're building," she said, leaning in. "Do you know what developers pay for land that close to a highway, with utilities already run to it, with water access?" I shook my head, bewildered. She pulled out her phone, started typing, swiping as only someone who lives on a screen can.
then turned it to show me a map. "That's your parcel," she said, pointing to a rectangle outlined in red. "See that?" She zoomed out. "That's the new commercial zoning area. The county just approved it. They're planning a logistics hub, warehouses, distribution centers, maybe even a light industrial park. Developers have been sniffing around every piece of dirt within a 3-mile radius. And you know this because they call me a lot." My stomach did a slow roll. "You're saying my burned out little farm is worth something?" "I'm saying your burned out little farm might just be your ticket out of this nightmare, if you let me help. The thing about being 60 is you stop believing in miracles. You start believing in paperwork." Lily actually drove me, in her own car, no Uber, no assistant, to her office after breakfast. She insisted I shower first at the shelter, dropped off a bag of clothes from some boutique she said she over-ordered from, the tags were still on, and waited in the lobby while I tried not to cry over the feel of clean jeans and a soft sweater. At her office, everything was glass and plants and quiet. She sat me down in a conference room with a view of the city and handed me a mug of good coffee, the kind that smells like it was brewed by angels. "Okay," she said, "here's what we're going to do." Over the next few days, with Lily driving the process like a general planning a campaign, we found my insurance policy information, the company had copies, met with a lawyer she trusted who looked over everything and assured me that yes, even with whatever idiotic changes Noah had convinced me to sign, I was still entitled to a decent payout for the loss of the structure and contents. Called the county about my land, got the current valuation, and confirmed the new zoning map. Quietly let a couple developers know that the owner of parcel 2746D might be open to offers. I watched all this from what felt like a great distance, like it was happening to someone else. Every time I tried to apologize for taking up her time, for being confused by terms like earnest money and due diligence, she'd cut me off. "You practically raised me," she'd say. "Let me pay a little of that back." We moved fast. Within a week, I had an insurance adjuster out at the ruins of my house, stepping carefully around the blackened foundation and taking photos. He mentioned replacement cost minus depreciation, and my heart sank. But Lily's lawyer nodded and started throwing around phrases like bad faith and statutory penalties. And I just sat there and tried not to hyperventilate.
Within 2 weeks, we had 3 offers from development companies for my land. The lowest was more money than I'd seen in my entire life. The highest made my head spin. After closing costs, paying off the small remaining mortgage I'd remortgaged once to help Noah through a rough patch, and setting aside a chunk for taxes, I was looking at enough money to buy myself a very nice little condo, live modestly for the rest of my life, and never see the inside of a shelter again. I cried when Lily showed me the breakdown, partly from relief. Partly from the realization that if I'd sold 10 years earlier, I could have avoided a lot of struggle, but mostly because I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: possibility. We closed on the land sale 6 weeks after the fire. 6 weeks from, apparently this is the end for me, to signing a stack of papers that turned dirt into 6 figures in my bank account. Throughout all this, Noah called exactly 3 times. Once, 2 days after the fire, to ask if I'd heard from the insurance yet. Once, a week later, to send me the name of a really affordable senior complex he'd found online, 40 miles away. Once, right after Lily posted a selfie with me on her private Instagram, she showed it to me, I smiled awkwardly, to text, "Did you sell the land? WTH, Mom, you should have talked to me first. That property was our asset." Our asset. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, very slowly, "My land, my house, my decision. You told me it was an old shack, remember? Enjoy not having to visit it anymore." He didn't respond.
He didn't know yet that the universe was about to take not visiting to a whole new level. Because once the paperwork dust settled and the money hit my account, Lily sat me down again in that glass conference room, spread out a folder, and said, "Okay, Aunt Margot, you're safe. You've got funds. You can buy a comfy place, live quietly, travel if you want. But I'm still pissed at Noah." I sipped my coffee. "That makes two of us. Are you open," she said carefully, "to being a little bit petty?" I smiled for the first time that day. "I'm 60, I said. "Petty is my birthright. What did you have in mind?" She slid a photo across the table. It was of a cute craftsman-style house in one of those older, tree-lined neighborhoods in Des Moines. Wood siding, front porch, small front yard with a crooked mailbox. The kind of place young professionals post on social media with captions like, "First real grown-up home." 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, updated kitchen, new roof, great neighborhood, walkable to shops, zoned in a good school district, not that you care about that part. "It's lovely," I said, "but I don't need 3 bedrooms." "That's good," she said, "because someone already lives there." "Then why are you showing it to me?" I asked. She tapped the paperwork. "Because the owners are retired and moving to Florida," she said. "They want to sell. Right now it's a rental property. They've got 1 tenant, been there about a year. Pays on time, no major complaints. Lease is month to month now." "Okay," I said slowly. She looked me in the eye. "The tenant," she said, "is named Noah Turner." For a second I thought she was joking. Then I saw the lease. His name, his signature, his email. My son. My son, who didn't have space for me, was living in a charming 3-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. "I've been doing some digging," Lily said, a little too casually. "Strictly legal, public records, landlord references, that kind of thing. He pays $1,400 a month right now. Market value for that area in this economy for that kind of house," she flipped a page, "closer to $2,200. He's getting a steal because the current owners like him and haven't bumped rent in years." "So?" I asked, though the beginnings of an idea were already tickling the back of my mind. "So," she said, leaning forward, "what if the nice retired couple sells the house to an LLC? And what if that LLC is managed by a certain real estate firm and owned by a certain woman who knows exactly how it feels to be left at a motel after her house burns down?" I stared at her. "You want me to buy his house?" "I want you to buy his house," she agreed, "quietly, through an LLC so he doesn't know it's you. Then we bring the rent up to market rate. Totally legal, totally normal. If he can afford it, great, he can stay, but he'll be paying you. If he can't, well, then he'll have to find services for people in his situation." My heart pounded. "But that's—" I started, then trailed off. "Cruel," I almost said. But was it? He'd left me in a motel, told me to go to a shelter, called my home an old shack, treated my disaster like an inconvenience in his schedule. He hadn't even asked where I was sleeping after the motel. "You're allowed to use the system that kicked you in the teeth," Lily said quietly. "You raised a man who thinks shelters are for other people. If the worst thing that happens to him is a taste of his own medicine, I'd say he's getting off easy." I sat there, staring at the pretty little house in the photo, picturing Noah's face when he got a polite letter from his new landlord explaining that his rent was going up by 50% in 60 days. I thought about the shelter, the smell, the way the man across from me had said, "At least I had a bed." I thought about being told to wander away from a bench. I thought about my son saying it would be easier for him if I were in a shelter. "I don't want to destroy him," I said slowly. "He's still my boy, stupid as he is. We're not destroying him. We're letting him live like the rest of us do, subject to consequences. He's been floating along assuming you'll always be there to bail him out. Maybe it's time he grows up." She hesitated, then added, "Decides. Don't you want to live somewhere you actually like? Somewhere with a porch and enough room for your books and that ancient Afghan you knitted?" I blinked. "You mean
She shrugged. Once his lease ends, or his tenancy, depending on how this goes, you can move in yourself. It's a good house. Better than any cookie-cutter condo. You could have the downstairs bedroom, save your knees, plant tomatoes out back, make friends with the neighbors. And in the meantime, I said, I'd be his landlord. Yes. And we will do absolutely everything by the book, so no one can say you did anything wrong. You're not breaking into his life. You're buying into it. Fair and square. I sat there for a long moment. Then I said, show me the numbers. Revenge, I've learned, is best served with a notarized signature. We formed an LLC in my name, Walnut Creek Holdings, after the little creek that used to flood behind my house. Lily's team handled all the filings. The house was listed privately to avoid triggering a bidding war, and the retiring couple were thrilled to sell to a nice, stable investor instead of some big, anonymous corporation. Will you be keeping the current tenant? The seller, a sweet older woman, asked during closing. For now, I said, with a pleasant smile. Lily probably learned in some media training seminar. We'll evaluate the property as we go. We closed on the purchase on a Thursday. On Friday, the property management arm of Lily's company, Turner & Hart Residential, sent out a welcome packet to the tenant. Dear Mr. Noah Turner, we are writing to inform you that the property you currently lease at address has been sold to a new owner, Walnut Creek Holdings, LLC. Effective immediately, Turner & Hart Residential will be managing the property on behalf of the owner. I insisted on approved legal language, no more and no less, all above board. At the end of the letter, as your current lease is on a month-to-month basis, terms are subject to change with 30 days, written notice. A separate notice regarding updated rental terms will follow. That separate notice went out the following week. It explained in polite, neutral wording that, due to market conditions and property taxes, the monthly rent would be increasing from $1,400 to $2,200 in 60 days. There it was in black and white, the number that would decide my son's immediate future. We didn't pick it out of spite. Lily pulled comps. That was the average for similar properties in that neighborhood. Some were even higher. We attached a line. If you are unable to meet the new rental rate, please contact our office to discuss your options, including a move-out timeline and references for future landlords. We're not monsters, Lily said. We'll help him land somewhere else, just not with you. I didn't sleep much that night. Part of me hoped he'd take it in stride, find a roommate, pick up extra hours, cut back on fancy dinners, do what I'd done my whole life when money got tight, adjust. Part of me wanted him to show up at my door, my new temporary furnished sublet, and beg, Mom, I got this notice and I'm scared. Can you help me figure it out? He didn't. Instead, he called the office. They recorded all calls for training and quality assurance. Lily played me the recording on her laptop, earbuds splitting between us like teenagers sharing music. This is ridiculous, Noah snapped. You can't just jack my rent up by $800. That's illegal. The property manager, a calm woman named Sandra, replied in a voice like warm tea. I understand this is frustrating, Mr. Turner, but under Iowa law, landlords can increase rent on a month-to-month lease with proper notice. You received 60 days notice, which is more than the 30 required. I've never missed a payment, he said. I'm a good tenant. We appreciate that, Sandra said. Unfortunately, market rates in your area have increased significantly, and the new owner's costs reflect that. I want to talk to the owner, he demanded. I'm afraid that's not possible, she said. However, I'm authorized to offer flexible move-out dates within the 60-day period, and we can provide a positive reference. He hung up. He didn't call me. At least, not about that. He did send me a vague text about how corporate greed is out of control and people are being priced out of their own neighborhoods, to which I replied with a thumbs-up emoji and nothing else. I know. Petty. At the end of the first month, he paid the old rent amount. We applied the payment and sent him a notice. This payment has been accepted as partial.
A remaining balance of $800 is now due. Please remit payment within 10 days to avoid late fees. He called the office again. This has to be personal, he fumed. No landlord raises rent this much unless they're trying to force someone out. Rent increases of this scale are unfortunate, but not uncommon in your neighborhood at this time. We empathize with your situation. He didn't call me. At the end of the notice period, he still hadn't paid the difference. We filed a notice to vacate. A week later, when that went ignored too, Walnut Creek Holdings, my little LLC with a big bite, filed for eviction. Are you sure? Lily asked me, even though we both knew we were past the point of half measures. He had months. He could have talked to me. He could have asked for help. He could have done anything. Okay, she said. Then we follow through. Eviction court is not glamorous. Fluorescent lights, hard chairs, a line of people waiting to find out if they'll still have a roof over their heads next week. Landlords in suits, tenants in work clothes, everyone looking tired and guilty, even if they hadn't done anything wrong. Lily insisted on going with the property manager. I stayed home. I thought briefly about showing up, sitting in the back, watching my son look around for his greedy landlord and having him see me instead. But this wasn't about theatrics. This was about consequences. The judge looked at the paperwork. Proper notices given, rent increase within legal limits, partial payments, unpaid balance. No countersuit filed by the tenant. Eviction granted. Possession to landlord in 10 days. Lily texted me one word from the hallway outside the courtroom. Done. 10 days later, a sheriff deputy knocked on the cute little craftsman door my son had once proudly posted on social media with the caption, "Home Sweet Rental." When Noah didn't answer, the deputy let himself in with the key from the property manager. The law is funny. Technically, no one dragged him out. There was no dramatic scene, no throwing of suitcases. He'd already started moving some things out, apparently. Friends helping him load boxes into cars. But there was still furniture, still clothes, still a life half scattered across the hardwood floors when the timeline ran out. The property manager supervised. The remaining items were cataloged and placed in storage for a set period as required. A notice was taped to the door. From a legal standpoint, everything was neat and tidy. From an emotional standpoint, it was devastating. For him. For me, it was complicated. Lily drove past the house after the eviction left just to make sure everything was secure. She texted me a photo of the front porch. Empty. No welcome mat, no bikes, no potted plants. Under it, she wrote, "She's all yours now." Noah didn't call me for a week after the eviction.
I didn't call him either. I told myself that if he wanted to talk, he knew how to reach me. My number hadn't changed. I was still in his contacts, under Mom, I hoped. In the meantime, I started planning my move. The house needed a little work, nothing major. Fresh paint, a deep clean, some minor repairs. Lily's crew handled most of it. I picked colors and tile like some kind of HGTV guest star. "We can get you in there by the end of the month," she said. "In the meantime," I said slowly, "I'd like to visit the shelter again." She looked surprised. "You don't have to." "I know," I said. "But I left there feeling like I'd died. I'd like to go back as someone who survived." She squeezed my shoulder. "You're stronger than you know, Aunt Margot." I didn't tell her the other reason I wanted to go. I had a strong hunch. See, the thing about shelters is that they're where people end up when everything else fails. When you've burned bridges, lost jobs, irritated every friend's couch, and alienated relatives who might have let you crash for a bit. I knew my son. I knew his pride, his tendency to assume that the universe would bend for him the way his mother always had. I knew he'd probably tried to talk his way into another rental without references. Knew he'd probably maxed out his credit card on Ubers and takeout and God knows what else instead of paying the new rent. And I knew that when money and charm ran out, the options narrowed. The shelter staff recognized me when I walked in, this time in a clean blouse and decent shoes. "Margot," the front desk woman said. "We heard you got placed somewhere. Everything okay?" "Better than okay," I said. "I just wanted to drop off some things and maybe talk to some folks." I'd brought 2 big bags of toiletries, socks, and notebooks, little things that make life in a place like that slightly more bearable. And I was hoping, I added casually, to see if a Noah Turner had checked in recently. Recognition flickered in her eyes. "He's your son?" she asked carefully. "Yes," I said. She hesitated, torn between confidentiality and the fact that this was obviously not some stalker situation. "He, came in yesterday," she said finally. "We've got him in the men's dorm. He, wasn't thrilled." I smiled tightly. "No, I imagine he wasn't. Do you want me to tell him you're here?" "No," I said. "I'll find him." The men's side of the shelter was louder than the women's. More cursing, more bluster. Fear often looks like anger in men. Always has. I walked slowly between the rows of bunks, ignoring the curious and occasionally leering looks. 60-year-old women are invisible until we aren't. I found him sitting on the edge of a bed near the back, hunched over his phone like it might spit out a miracle if he stared hard enough. He looked smaller. Not physically, he was still a solid guy, mid-30s, thick shoulders, the same cowlick he'd had as a kid, but his shoulders were slumped. His clothes were rumpled, there were circles under his eyes. I stood there for a moment, just looking at him. My boy, my grown man, my idiot. "Excuse me," I said. He glanced up annoyed, then did a double take. "Mom?" he said, as if I might be a hallucination. "Hi, honey," I said. "Mind if I sit?" He blinked, scooted over automatically, the way he had when he was little and I'd join him on the couch. "What are you doing here? Are you okay? I thought you got into some senior place." "I'm fine," I said, lowering myself onto the thin mattress. "I came to volunteer. Thought I'd bring some supplies." His face twisted. "God, this place is awful. The beds are like concrete and they wake you up at dawn like you're in boot camp." "Yeah," I said, mildly. "I remember." He froze. You were here?" he asked slowly. "I was. After the fire. Before Lily found me in the breakfast line." He stared at me, mouth slightly open. "I didn't know," he said. "You didn't ask," I replied. He flinched. We sat in silence for a moment, then it all came tumbling out of him in a rush, the way it had once when he'd crashed his bike and tried not to cry. "The landlord raised my rent by $800. Who does that? And then they wouldn't negotiate, they just sent notices and filed for eviction like I'm some kind of deadbeat. I tried to keep up, but you could have moved sooner." He scowled. "I have a life, Mom.
I can't just pick up and move on a dime. And do you know how hard it is to find a decent place right now? You need a security deposit, first month's rent, references. My old landlord was my reference, and now they're mad at me. So that's gone too. I've been sleeping on Mike's couch, then Jenna's, but they both have roommates and it got weird. And my credits shot from that one card I maxed out after the layoff, and..." He rubbed his hands over his face. "I just needed, like, a few more months. Or if the owner had just been a human being and not some LLC, Walnut Creek Holdings," I said. He frowned. "Yeah, that. How do you know?" "I am Walnut Creek Holdings," I said. He blinked. "What?" he asked flatly. "I bought the house," I said. "The one you were renting. I'm the owner. Lily manages it for me." He stared at me like I'd started speaking Russian. "You bought my house?" he said slowly. "My house. It's not your house," I said. "It never was. You were renting. remember? But why? He stammered. Why would you do that? Because, I said, feeling years of swallowed words gather behind my teeth. When my house burned down, the house your grandfather built and your father renovated, and I kept standing with my bare hands, you left me in a motel and suggested I find a shelter. He flushed. I thought there were resources. You didn't offer your couch, I said, or your spare room, or your floor. You didn't say, come stay with me for a while, Mom, until we figure this out. You said, and I quote, there are services for people in your situation. Okay, but that doesn't mean you called my home an old shack, I went on. You acted like the fire had inconvenienced you. You didn't call to see where I ended up. You didn't ask how I was. You didn't show up at the shelter and say, what the hell is my mother doing here? His mouth opened and closed. I'm sorry, he said weakly. I'm sure you are, I said, now that the shoe's on the other foot. He looked around at the rows of bunks, the chipped paint, the bathroom door hanging crooked on its hinges. So you did this to, what, teach me a lesson? He asked. I took a breath. No, I said. I did it because it was a good investment. The house is in a solid neighborhood. The price was right. I needed a place to live, and it made more sense to own something than to throw money at rent. Raising the rent was bringing it up to market value. Everything was legal, above board. Just like the people at the county office told me when they shipped me off to the shelter. I let that sink in. Then I added very calmly, and as a side effect, yes, you got to experience what it feels like when the person with the power over your housing situation treats you like a line item instead of a human being. How's that working for you? His eyes were shiny. Do you have any idea what it's like trying to sleep here? People yelling, snoring, the lights. I had to put my stuff in a locker and I still feel like it's going to get stolen. I can't think. I can't breathe half the time. It's humiliating. Yeah, I said softly. I do know. I was here, remember? He stared at me, then dropped his gaze. I thought you'd forgive me, he muttered. You always forgive me. There it was, the assumption that had held our relationship together like duct tape. Noah, and my voice shook now, for your entire life, I have bent over backwards to make sure you were okay. I worked myself sick so you could have what you wanted. I loaned you money I didn't have. I bailed you out of leases, car payments, credit card debt. When your father died and I could barely get out of bed, I still packed your lunch and signed your permission slips and made sure you didn't feel the earth shifting under your feet. He swallowed hard. That's what moms do, he said, but without conviction. That's what I did. I corrected. I chose that gladly, but I didn't sign up to be abandoned the second my usefulness expired in your eyes. He flinched again. You called me a useless, homeless old woman, I said quietly. Maybe not in those exact words, but that's what you meant. You made it very clear that my problems were not your problems and that you were relieved not to have to drive so far to see me anymore. His shoulders hunched. I was stressed, he said.
I lost that big client, and Emma was talking about wanting a bigger place, and I was on fire, I snapped, literally and figuratively. You don't get to blame your schedule for leaving your own mother in a shelter. We sat in silence, the noise of the dorm swirling around us. Finally, he whispered, I didn't think it would be this bad. Homelessness? I asked. It usually is. Are you going to make me stay here? He asked, looking suddenly very young. I sighed. I'm not God, Noah, I said. I'm not handing down punishments. You're here because of your choices." He opened his mouth, then closed it. "But," I added, because I am not as heartless as he thinks, "I'm also not interested in watching my only child spiral completely out of control. So here's what's going to happen." He looked at me like a condemned man listening to his sentence. "You're going to stay here," I said, "for at least 2 weeks." "What?" he yelped. "Mom!" "2 weeks," I said firmly, "with the noise, with the early wake-ups, with the forms and the lines, and the way people look at you like you're trash. You're going to absorb it. You're going to remember that when you told me to go to a shelter, this is what you were consigning me to." "That's messed up," he muttered. "You're my mother. You're supposed to—" "I am supposed to teach you. I seem to have missed a few lessons." He scowled, but he didn't argue. "After 2 weeks," I said, "you can come talk to me. We'll have lunch. Then we will discuss what comes next." Will you help me get a place?" he asked, hating himself for asking, I could tell. "Maybe," I said, "depending on whether you're more interested in being comfortable or in changing." He looked at me like he didn't quite recognize me. "Where are you living now?" he asked, as if it had just occurred to him that I must be living somewhere. "In your old house," I said. He stared. "What?" I smiled, small but real. "Oh, great," I said lightly. "Now you've moved out of my house, now I can move in with my new furniture." His mouth opened and closed like a fish. "You're living—" He broke off, pressed his palms into his eyes. "This is insane." "Is it?" I asked. "I pay the mortgage. I pay the taxes. I'll be repainting that ugly lime green accent wall you put in the living room." "That wall was cool," he muttered automatically. "It was migraine-inducing," I said. Anyway, the point is, I have a home again. One I chose. One I can afford. One that didn't get handed to me. I made it happen, with help from someone I once babysat while her father worked nights to keep the lights on. He stared at the floor. "Lily," he said. It wasn't a question. "She's behind this, isn't she?" "Lily's behind the part where I didn't die in a shelter bunk. The rest I handled myself." We sat there for a long time. Finally, he whispered, "I'm sorry." "I know. I was selfish," he said. I didn't want to deal with it. Any of it. The house, your bills, the fire. It felt like this giant responsibility dropping out of nowhere, and I panicked, and you defaulted to thinking of yourself first." He nodded miserably. "I always figured you'd be fine. You've always landed on your feet. I assumed you would again." Funny thing about assumptions, they tend to crumble in fires. He huffed out a watery laugh. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," he said, surprising me. I don't know if I'd forgive me, honestly. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The lines of worry around his eyes, the way his hands shook just a little. My son, the boy who'd once cried when his goldfish died, the man who'd shoved his mother toward a shelter because her need made him uncomfortable. Both were true. I don't know if I forgive you yet either, but I'm willing to see what you do with this. He frowned. With what? With the knowledge that you are not invincible, that you can end up exactly where I sent you, that shelter beds are not abstract, that the people in them have names and histories and people who love them, or did once. He swallowed. I'll see you in 2 weeks, Noah, I added. If you want to talk before then, you can write. There's a bulletin board by the office. I'll tell them they can give me my mailing address.
He looked up sharply. "You're not going to stay? I have a doctor's appointment and a new couch being delivered. Turns out when you start over at 60, you get to pick your own style for once." I took a step, then paused.
"Oh, and Noah," I said. "Yeah?" he asked, voice small. "When you get out of here," I said, "you're gonna get a job. Any job. You're gonna pay off your debts one by one. And if I help you with first and last month's rent somewhere, it'll be a loan. In writing, with interest." He made a face. "Interest? From your own son?" "Consider it an educational fee," I said. "Welcome to adulthood. You're late, but better late than never." I left him sitting there, staring after me. It hurt. It also felt like the first honest thing I'd done as his mother in years. Moving into the house my son had once called his was surreal. The first night, I sat on the front porch with a cup of tea, listening to the city sounds, distant traffic, a dog barking, someone's TV, and thought about the farm, about the walnut tree, probably cut down by now, about the creek, about the way the stars had looked, clear and sharp when you stepped outside at midnight. I thought about my father, my husband, the life that had gone up in smoke. Then I looked at the streetlight illuminating my neatly swept sidewalk and thought, I survived. The house still had echoes of Noah, the aforementioned lime green accent wall, which I promptly had painted a soothing blue, the set of mismatched mugs in the cabinet, I kept a few, the dent in the drywall where he'd once thrown a controller in a fit of gaming rage. Some things never change. But day by day, it became mine. I hung photos of my parents, my husband, and yes, even Noah as a baby with spaghetti on his face. I planted herbs in the little patch of dirt by the back steps. I made friends with the neighbor, a retired nurse who brought over a casserole and whispered, "We were all wondering what would happen when the young man down the street got himself evicted. Honestly, he always parked like he owned the whole block. You seem much nicer." I pay attention to lines, on the street and in life, she laughed. 2 weeks after our conversation at the shelter, I got a note in the mail. The return address was the shelter's. Inside was a folded piece of paper in Noah's handwriting. "Mom, 2 weeks here feels like 2 years. I've had more conversations with people who've lost everything than I've had with my own feelings in the last decade. There's this guy, Ron, who lost his house because his wife got sick and they chose chemo over the mortgage. There's a woman who aged out of foster care and never stood a chance. And then there are people like me who just made dumb choices and thought the world would cushion their fall. I've been all three, in different ways. I'm not asking you to feel sorry for me. I think I needed this as much as I hate it. I needed to see what you saw, to feel it in my bones." I talked to one of the caseworkers. They're helping me apply for a job at the warehouse near your old land. Irony, right? I'll be loading boxes on the site where my childhood home used to be. I'm also meeting with a credit counselor. They showed me exactly how screwed I've made myself. I'm going to dig out. Slowly. Properly. If you're still willing to have that lunch, I'd like that. I know I don't deserve your help. I know I definitely don't deserve a loan with interest. But if the offer's still on the table, I'd like to earn back your trust. I'm sorry. I love you. Noah. I read it 3 times. Then I picked up my phone and called the shelter. "Can I leave a message for a resident?" I asked. "Sure," the front desk woman said. "Tell Noah that I'll meet him at the cafe on 3rd and Walnut on Saturday at noon, and that he can wear whatever he wants, as long as he brings a pen." "Pen?" she asked, amused. "For the loan contract," I said. I'm sitting in my living room now. My living room. The walls are a gentle blue. The couch is new, firm enough for my bad back, but soft enough for afternoon naps. There's a plant in the corner that I've managed to not kill yet. On the coffee table is a folder with a signed loan agreement in it.
Noah and I met at that cafe, not the one where I had been chased off, a different one, a little less pretentious. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. He also looked humbled. We talked. He apologized again, this time with specifics instead of just, "I'm sorry." I listened. I told him my conditions: therapy, steady employment, a budget we'd draft together, regular payments on the loan.
No more assuming Mom would bail him out for free. He agreed. Will he follow through? I don't know. People are messy. Change is slow. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm not enabling him. I'm offering a hand up, not a cushion. As for the revenge, I won't pretend it didn't feel satisfying. In a cold, sharp way, to sit on the porch of the house he'd once posted online like a trophy and know that I owned it, legally, fully, without a single cent of his money. It felt good to know that when he called his landlord greedy, he was really calling me that, and that I'd earned every penny of what I'd done. But more than satisfaction, what I feel now is balance. He learned that homelessness isn't an abstract concept reserved for old ladies in shacks. It's a reality that can swallow anyone, including arrogant sons who think resources will catch everyone but them. I learned that I'm not as helpless as I'd been made to feel, that even at 60, after losing almost everything, I could rebuild. I could learn about LLCs and zoning maps and rental law. I could wield contracts instead of casseroles. My father used to say, land outlasts people. He was right. But what I've come to believe is this: boundaries outlast guilt. I lost a house. I gained a spine. And I'm sitting in my son's old living room in my new house, sipping my tea while he figures himself out in a world that finally isn't softened by my sacrifices. I don't know yet what our relationship will look like in 5 years, but I do know this. If you raise someone to believe you'll always be their safety net, sometimes the only way to teach them is to step aside and let them feel the fall. Preferably with a lawyer on your side and a deed in your name.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Bye bye!